The mean girls of District 7 and Pasco MPO. So a mean girl in the rhetorical sense is anyone who gossips about their victim, sabotages their work, excludes them from important activities, withholds important information, ridicules them, is dismissive and two-faced towards them, and bullies or harasses them. A mean girl is maliciously passive-aggressive. These are the behaviors District 7 and the Pasco MPO directed at me and the PFI in one degree or another from day one over the course of 7 years. Neither I nor the PFI deserved this treatment. The internal FDOT emails I reference here, I obtained via a public records request for May 2022, years after they were exchanged without my knowledge. They contain attitudes of bigotry and disdain towards me and the PFI before their authors had spent any real effort to understand the design. These individuals were against the PFI from the start. Maybe it's jealousy, maybe contempt for my patent, maybe because they just don't like new, or some of all. I don't know. But it's clear to me the PFI never had a chance. Questions and comments on my PFI concept proposal were generated internally by Wada Farah of District 7 and Rosanna Correa, Jacobs Engineering Consultant, which Farah sent to Bogan and Ron Chin, the District 7 Traffic Engineering Manager, and CC'd several others on 30 March 2016. Their comments were not provided to me until my public record request, and I was never given the courtesy to respond. That, what utter crap from them. Okay, these two people, and as far as I know, the only two people at FDOT that actually read my proposal, they generated comments and they had questions. There's a document. It was distributed. It was circulated. Bogan got it. Gwen got a copy. I didn't get a copy. I was never given a chance to respond to their comments and questions. I think that they have a legal and ethical responsibility to have provided me those questions and comments for a response. There's a standard of due care that they have to exercise as engineers. They also have, I think, an official obligation. It's a matter of doing their job. I think NEPA requires them. It's under the standard of doing a rigorous and objective evaluation. The PFI was not an alternative at this time. But there they had the comments, they had the questions already compiled. They could have sent them to me and I would have answered and addressed all of them. Because mostly they're not right. But I wasn't given that courtesy. Okay, that's Gwen and Bogan. Okay, two scumbags. Shuping, FDOT District 7, sent a disdainful email 1 April 2016 to several District 7 staff. Quote, I am amazed that you can get a U.S. patent for the PFI, end quote. Well, I did. And, instead of him just being amazed, he could have sent that email to me and said, hey, Parsons, I didn't know you could get a patent for a PFI like this. What's that all about? I would have been happy to answer the question. I would have been happy to say, to explain to him how and why. Right? But mean girls talk behind people's back. That's what mean girls do. Larry Hagan, District 7 consultant, responded with, quote, I don't know how you could patent this. It's not substantially different from the continuous flow intersection that was being bantered around a few years ago. Pedestrian treatments are a bit lacking, end quote. Well, just shows the ignorance of these people whose job it is to know roadway and traffic engineering. CFI just places left turns and the PFI does not, which makes a big difference in their respective geometry and operation. I cited the CFI as prior art in my patent application, and the examiners felt the PFI was sufficiently different enough to grant the patent. It's different. It's not the same thing. Can't get that through their hard heads. But the PFI is different, it operates differently. The bypass roads for the PFI function as frontage roads. The bypass ramps of the CFI function as ramps. The CFI displaces the left turn and the PFI does not. This bigoted mindset prevailed at District 7 for the entire 7 years. So much for objectivity. And Hagen went on to write, quote, surely they're not thinking about something like the PFI at US 41 at SR 54, end quote. I mean, they're not thinking about that. That's the whole point of the damn feasibility study is to determine if it's feasible. If it's feasible, build it. If it's the best project. He went on, quote, this will be much worse than anything the grade separation could have done. Look at the huge right-of-way impacts for this, end quote. He concludes this after being exposed to the PFI for the first time and before any actual engineering analysis has been performed, other than my own. And he either didn't read my proposal or dismissed it. This is knee-jerk bigotry. That's why studies are done to objectively quantify level of service safety, impacts, and cost before making uninformed snap judgments. His opinion that the PFI would involve huge right-of-way impacts compared to the SPUI was wrong, given the PFI needs 50% less right-of-way than the SPUI per District 7's own PD&E feasibility study. So after they actually did perform their study, as very flawed and incorrect as it was, it still demonstrates that the PFI utilizes much less space than the SPUI does. You know, the SPUI, the grade separation, that's requires a large footprint because you've got to get the road up in the air and back down, and you have to have space for the ramps. So it's this kind of ignorant bigotry that has prevented the PFI from being built, along with hefty doses of corruption. I've had to contend with this attitude for years. Okay, it didn't just start with these guys. Every DOT I've brought the PFI to it's been met with the similar kind of just ignorant bigotry against it. You know, ooh, that looks confusing. Oh, man, look how big that thing is. Yeah, compare it to the alternatives and do an objective comparison. And you see that it actually isn't going to take as much space. It actually isn't confusing. But no. From an email by Matthew Weaver, District 7 on 4 April 2016, quote, as far as I know, my friends at Ohio DOT don't pay this person any money for the intersection at US 741 in Austin Pike in Springsboro, Ohio, designed and built between 2008 and 2012, end quote. That's because the Ohio intersection isn't a PFI. It's a CFI. Again, one call to me, and I'd have gladly provided an answer. But mean girls don't do direct, honest communication. On 6 April 2016, Chen sent this email to me. It's very nice. Thank you for your patience, Greg. I'm wanting to learn more about your innovative concept. Not really. And in particular, from looking at the concept, perhaps you could help me and team understand more about 1. The difference of your concept versus a CFI. 2. How you would phase signal operations. 3. Accommodations for pedestrians. 4. Accommodations for bicyclists. 5. Obviating wrong way movements. We plan to have our traffic services engineer, safety engineer, and signal systems engineer, no consultants, all senior level personnel, present to discover your innovative concept, as I firmly believe we must find unconventional ways to solve conventional problems in these times, especially when right-of-way is scarce and costly these days. Ron. That just sounds really great. I mean, of course, he could have, instead of listing these 5 items, he could have sent me the comments from Farah, and I would have responded to those comments. Whatever. But the only reason I got this email from Chen is because FDOT Chief Engineer Tom Byron urged the meeting. So at that time, I had met with Tom Byron in Tallahassee and his people, and Byron, to his credit, and I have no criticisms of Byron whatsoever. He treated me well, with respect. He contacted Chen by email and said, hey, can you set something up with this guy? So it was Byron who facilitated this. Once Byron was out of the picture, this kind of treatment never repeated. This is the first and last meeting that I would have with FDOT District 7 technical staff, and the only interaction I would have with them in the 7 years that follow. Yeah, so Byron had urged the meeting. So Byron was copied this email, which is why he's being so nice to me, and just sounds just so, he really cares. I gave my presentations to District 7 Traffic Ops 8 April 2016. They humored me for a couple of hours. This would be the last time I'd give a presentation to FDOT, the only time I would get questions over the next 7 years, including the 4-year District 7 PD&E feasibility study, during which the PFI was an official FDOT alternative. So this one time where I made this presentation to them and got some questions is the only time that they would contact me or talk to me or ask me anything about the PFI over the following 7 years. And 4 years of that was their feasibility study. No more questions for Greg about the PFI. They did theirs wrong. They didn't follow my specifications. They made their PFI stupid. I complained repeatedly and I was ignored. So after my presentation, Chen sent the following email to Brian McKishney with FDOT. I don't know if he's in District 7. On 8 April 2016. I think he is. Chen writes, because this is a patented design and sole source, the designer wants a penny for each trip for the design life of the facility. Over 20 years, this is expected to cost $12.4 million. It's not quite right. I would recommend we review a CFI at first with an economic analysis and comparison with the build alternative, single point urban interchange, and if we were not satisfied with the level of service, Then and only then would we evaluate the PFI. The model shows impressive results. My model shows impressive results with level service D in 2040. The build alternative supposedly fails when it opens. So yeah, my emphasis here. So it was actually 12.8 million was my proposed fee after tax. That's the penny per trip. That was what I was proposing. That would mean I received 12.8 million after tax. Note that his response to my presentation is to urge FDOT to consider the CFI, and if its level service is satisfactory, screw me and reject the PFI. Why wasn't the CFI included in the original PD&E? Because the Pasco MPO corruption, maybe. You know, where they limited the alternatives to grade separation only. Then, only after I proposed the PFI, all of a sudden it's, well, what about the CFI? How about that? I spend months developing the PFI, my proposal to them. I propose it to them, and their response is, well, let's just look at the CFI now. And Chen is proposing to only do a synchroanalysis of the CFI. What he didn't recognize, and this was a common theme with both agencies over the 7 years, is that the PFI is not a CFI and should be treated as its own type of junction. That's like saying, let's screen a SPUI if it works, and then eliminate all other bridge alternatives. Which I'm sure FDOT would be happy to do, actually. You know, it's not compliant with NEPA, but it saves work. You know, they don't have to work so hard. If they just pick the project, evaluate that, and say, well, it worked, why look at any other alternatives? Okay, other than the fact that NEPA requires them to. You know, the whole NEPA was enacted to stop that BS by the DOTs, because that's what they did routinely back in the day, you know, before the 1969. Of course, now they still do it. It's just that they have to be more sly about it. But back in the day, they would just pick what they want, regardless of impacts, regardless of how it affected people, regardless of cost. They just pick what they want, and then they just bulldoze it through. That was the DOT mindset. NEPA comes along, and it's like, okay, well, we can't just bulldoze through what we want to do. We now have to pretend to evaluate other alternatives and then bulldoze through what we want to do. So that's the game today. So for the sake of doing an evaluation of alternatives, it's not an either-or question, any more than a CFI and modern roundabout are, but a which is better question after an evaluation is done. Gosh, those evaluations, God, but that's work. That's work. You know, I think it sucks. It's really terrible that we expect the bureaucrats to work. You know? You know? It's much more fun to surf the internet during the day than to actually do your job. You know, when I was a consultant, okay, working for these, you know, people, I was doing weekends. I was working holidays. I was working all-nighters. I worked back-to-back all-nighters to ensure that what I was delivering to them was top quality and on time and on budget. When I was doing the consulting work, working for URS, Trans Systems, that I took pride in my work. I worked hard. I wanted to do a good job. I'm serving them, so I want to make them happy. So I put in the necessary effort to do that. Well, they serve the public, allegedly, and the taxpayers, right? But they don't put in an extra 5 minutes. They're not working weekends. They're not working holidays. They're not working into the night. They're not doing all-nighters, right? And if they have to do an evaluation of the PFI, oh my, wow. That's just demanding way too much of these selfless public servants, right? No matter how good it is, no matter how much money it saves, that's just too much of a demand on them. So what distinguishes the PFI from the CFI is how the two impact the site, which a synchro analysis does not answer. So they just wanted, all they wanted to do, all he's proposing is, well, let's just screen the CFI, and if it screens okay, then just forget about the PFI. Of course, the problem with that is that the CFI, by the nature of its geometry, is not physically feasible at that location because of the railroad track. Not that they understand that or are willing to admit that. He, meaning me, Parsons, said the SPUI, oh no, Chen said, in his email, Chen says the SPUI supposedly fails, referring to me and my analysis. Well, it's in their analysis that it fails. That what they show the public is that it fails. So it's not supposedly fails, it will fail. That's why I say, even though their own analysis of the SPUI from 2015 clearly shows the SPUI signal definitely fails. But Chen knows they lie to the public when it comes to synchro level of service and delay results. FDOT loves to lie to the public about delay on their projects. They lowball delay on all their projects when they have oversaturated conditions. So if you don't have an oversaturated condition, synchro gives an accurate result, but when it's oversaturated, which almost all of the movements at the SPUI signal on this project are oversaturated, congested, synchro gives a BS result, grossly under estimating the delay that will actually occur, or the queuing that's going to occur. He knows this. They know this. So I proposed the PFI alternative concept to FDOT after months of development, and all of a sudden District 7 discovers a CFI. Ha! I proposed the PFI, and all of a sudden District 7 discovers level of service. You know, they don't care that the SPUI is going to be a parking lot at the signal. But I proposed a PFI, and it's like, well, let's look at the CFI, and if it's got good enough level of service, we'll just use that. And then I say here, later during the feasibility study, they conveniently forget. All of a sudden, level of service doesn't matter. So on 7 June 2016, District 7 held an internal meeting to discuss the PFI. Secretary Gwynn was in attendance. Through my public record request, I obtained a copy of the meeting minutes. Questions were raised, opinions expressed, but again, I was not involved, nor provided any opportunity to respond. I'm the sole expert on the PFI, but they excluded me completely as they signed each other up based on their own PFI misconceptions and wrong presumptions. From the minutes, quote, the group then discussed the viability of a PFI at this location and noted that the PFI design has been patented by Mr. G.F. Parsons, which would presumably require FDOT to pay royalties in the event that District 7 selected the PFI alternative for implementation, end quote. I clearly stated in my PFI concept proposal I was not seeking royalties, but a one-time value engineering fee. But rather than assume, why not just ask? Why couldn't they just ask me? Does this guy want royalties? I mean, you know, none of them read the proposal except for Farah, and maybe he didn't read that part of my proposal. So it's a question. You know, well, we're going to presume this guy wants royalties, of course. Why not ask? Why not just ask? Okay, no, can't do that. Can't do that. Mean girls can't do that. From the minutes, quote, Brian McKishney noted, so he is with District 7, that traffic operations is recommending that an evaluation of a continuous flow intersection be conducted first in lieu of the PFI. And I'm adding here to screw me over, again, the CFI wasn't in the picture until I proposed the PFI. What a bunch of dicks. Okay. After this, District 7 gave no further consideration to the PFI until April 2019, when the PD&E feasibility study began. The intervening years, 2017 and 2018, were a detour to accommodate the completely useless and unnecessary Pasco MPO Vision 5456 study Phase 2 circus. During those 2 years, I CC'd many emails to Bogan and Lilium Escalera, then FDOT PD&E project manager, containing my objections to how the MPO was mistreating the PFI, and District 7 was silent about it. Yeah, they didn't say anything. They didn't care. So the MPO is abusing the PFI and doing crap work, and I'm seeing the potential for the PFI being eliminated, and I am relaying this to District 7, to Bogan. He didn't care. None of them care. They were perfectly okay with the MPO abusing the PFI and lying about the SPUI, because later they would do the same thing. From an email by Ping Shu on 17 June 2016, quote, this gentleman, me, got the patent in 2004 and nothing done? Something is strange, end quote. Yeah, it is strange. The reason no PFI was built in over a dozen years of me trying is that every single DOT and local government I proposed it to said no with zero consideration, no matter how beneficial the PFI promised to be. With one exception, there's a project in Alaska where I proposed the PFI, and they actually did have a freeway classification, so they couldn't build the PFI there. The ACT-grade people, they could have built the PFI interchange, but they didn't care about it. Let's see, with one exception, the dozens of agencies I approached said no. And the reason to reject was always absolute BS. There was always an administrative excuse that I knew was garbage, that was nonsense. Bureaucrats love to do that. That's something, if you're ever dealing with a bureaucrat, just know that if you're proposing something to the bureaucrat that means he has to do anything, you're going to get a, well, I can't for, and it's going to be a perfectly plausible but wrong excuse. I mean, that's been my experience. So, but unlike District 7, at least they said no up front, not 7 years later, after putting me through the ringer. FDOT internal emails show that repeatedly District 7 staff would assume this or that about me and the PFI Not once did they bother to reach out to me or include me in their exchanges for clarification. Because they're mean girls. My proposal to District 7 to expedite the PD&E, reasonable and ignored. So, I outlined what I thought was very reasonable steps to complete the PD&E, with the PFI included. And this is after I had met with Federal Highways, Nick Finch, then Assistant Administrator of the FHWA Florida Division, and a couple of other individuals at Federal Highways. So the following excerpt is from a 28 July 2016 memo I sent to District 7 and CC'd FHWA Florida Division. I explained my fee, given federal funding, and my proposal to add the PFI and CFI to the PD&E to avoid unnecessary delays. District 7 didn't even deign to respond. They didn't respond to that email, to that memo at all, is my recollection. So it demonstrated to me that my opinion didn't matter at all to them. And from the start, they had no intention of giving me, the PFI, or even the CFI, proper treatment. So, just to go through this real quick, over the past month, I've engaged Federal Highways in an effort to come to an understanding of Federal Highway policy concerning the patented PFI. So, and this would be on FDOT projects using federal funds, which they will be using. I think we made great progress. So concerning the Federal Highway treatment of the patent, I understand from Nick the following: that FHWA can approve use of the PFI on projects using federal funds if the public interest finding requirement has been satisfied. So because the PFI is patented, in order for me to get my money, which Federal Highways would pay, like 80% of the fee, maybe all of it, might have all been paid by Federal Highways. We didn't get into that at the time. But in principle, they'd pay most of my fee, if not all. But they required a public interest finding be satisfied. It's unfortunate abbreviation, PIF. It's like PFI, but it's PIF, public interest finding. And the understanding I reached with Finch is that the PD&E NEPA documents produced by FDOT would satisfy that requirement, that they become the public interest finding, because they are basically a public interest finding. The NEPA documentation is just in principle itself a public interest finding, and he agreed with that. So Nick Finch was very good. I have no complaints about Finch at all, and I had good interaction with him, just as I did with Byron. So I have no complaints about either of those individuals. But there was only so much Finch could do, because this project had not come to Federal Highways at the time. So it was at that time it was just a FDOT project. But seeing that it would come at some point, he understood that it would be important to have this issue resolved with the patent. So he's willing to work with me. That as part of the PD&E NEPA study, the proprietary PFI alternative must be justified for use over the most equivalent, feasible, non-proprietary alternative. So what he was saying is that the PFI needed to be evaluated with its nearest equivalent non-proprietary alternative, which he wanted it to be the CFI. I disagreed with him on that. I felt that the nearest equivalent alternative would be the one that is ranked second after the PFI. That's the nearest equivalent. But he wanted to see it, the CFI added, which is fine. So I said that's okay. So there was that. So we had this understanding of the public interest finding that would clear the way for me to get my fee on the patent if the PFI is selected as the billed alternative. So then I outlined the steps for FDOT to follow on the PD&E that would allow for the PD&E to be done in a timely fashion, and these steps are reasonable. So I said that the first step is for the consultant to validate my alternative, my design, my PFI design, which I had done in CAD. I used VSIM, and it was done to FDOT standards. So they could have had their consultant review my work, check it. Then the consultant to screen the CFI, which Federal Highways calls a displaced left turn, and quadrant intersection, or QI, alternatives. The QI had been considered by the MPO at that time. It's a dumb alternative for that location, but that was something they were considering. And so, okay, we'll include that too. So basically, screen the CFI and QI, and use conceptual level geometry with their design year 2040 peak hour traffic in synchro. So, okay. Then based on the screening result above, FDOT to select either the DLT or QI, whichever screens best, or neither, if neither appear feasible, or FDOT is unwilling to build for some reason. And I say here that if both the DLT or CFI and QI are dismissed, if both are dismissed, then the consultant to provide explanation in the PD&E study document, and then add the PFI to compare to the current SPUI alternatives. Note, for this scenario, GF Parsons seeks an after-tax fee equal to a penny per vehicle trip over 20-year PFI design life. Okay, so under that scenario where they screen the CFI but eliminate it and then add the PFI for their feasibility study to compare to the SPUI, I get my $12.8 million fee, or before tax, we'll say $20 million fee, which I note here would have meant a $94 million project cost savings. If you include life cycle costs, that would have been $100 million savings for the taxpayers, for the Treasury. I get 20, the Treasury gets 100 million. If they had just done that, and they would have finished the PD&E in a timely manner, and they would have opened this damn project by 2022 and fixed the intersection with the PFI, I would have gotten my 20 million. The Treasury would have gotten 100 million, and people would be using that intersection today, and it would have been fixed. That's all they had to do. That's all they had to do at that time. But they're scumbags. They're total scumbags. That's all they had to do. They would have had the PFI included, added, amended to their PD&E, and wrapped up the study. And for the Vision 5456 study, it would have been a future existing condition. That's how they should have added it to the Vision 5456 study. The PFI as a future existing condition. No, couldn't do that. Couldn't do that. But that PFI could have been there today, and the people driving that intersection today would not be stuck in congestion. That would have been the responsible thing to do. I think that would have been the legally obligated thing to do. It's the ethically obligated thing to do. No. Couldn't do any of that. Then the other scenario is if either the DLT or CFI and QI, if either of those, they would be kept in, so whichever screened best would be added. The consultant would develop that alternative to an equal level of detail as my validated PFI alternative using CAD and VSIM. So what I was suggesting there is that if they wanted to evaluate the CFI to this higher, go beyond screening, evaluate it, then the CFI is added to their study with the PFI, but they use my PFI geometry, and they have their consultant only do the CFI. So they would have had the SPUIs already done, their consultant does the CFI, and my PFI is added. Okay, but under that scenario, I wanted 50% of the difference. So then my fee goes to $57 million. So the difference between the PFI and SPUI is $114 million. I get 50%. The Treasury gets 50%, plus the life cycle cost savings. So that puts the Treasury at over $60 million in savings. I get $57 million if they also evaluate the CFI. I believed then, still do, CFI is not feasible on 41. But if they're going to include it and take it to that level of detail where they're going to price it out, and add that extra work to their study, well then I want my fee to the original 50% that I would have proposed otherwise, not the penny per trip. So I was just trying to create an incentive. I believed at this point in time, and still do, the PFI is the best project. So the way I'm looking at this then is that the PFI is going to be the project. In my mind, there's no question the PFI is going to be the project, but under these two scenarios, the study will be done quicker if they eliminate the CFI but satisfy federal highways public interest finding requirement by screening it and realize it's not feasible. Then it's just between the PFI and SPUI. I'm talking about basically giving up $37 million. That's the difference between 20 million versus the 50%, 57 million. But they didn't care because the PFI was never seriously considered in the first place. So then the consultant prepares LRE, which is long range estimate, for the PFI and selected DLT or QI alternative with my patent fee added as a project cost. Consultant to add both the PFI and selected DOT or QI alternative to the PD&E for comparison to the SPUI alternatives. Now, this is kind of muddled here, but anyhow, the idea was then they take my design of the PFI, add it to the PD&E with whether it's the CFI or QI that the consultant designs, and then they compare. They do the cost estimates, impact estimates from that. Okay, perfectly reasonable way of wrapping up their study and getting the project built. I got no response to this from them at all. Just ignored.